council rules of procedure, a continuation of the discussion that has been ongoing for some period of time. Thanks to the efforts of council members Collins and Brooke in particular, we evolved ourselves into where we are now. And kind of to summarize this process and bring us current, and invite our city manager, Dan McKean, to kind of get started here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will just provide a short introduction to the subject, primarily because the public may not know all the work that went into this so far. And since the Council's been involved in many topics since then, it'll be a kind of catch up on that too, with a reminder. So there have been 3 council work sessions that, at least in part, have been dedicated to the council rules of procedure. It started back in March of this year when we started the process. And during those work sessions, the council went through section by section of their existing council rules of procedure and looked at different rules of procedure based on the sections, and have incorporated some of the best practices of other communities into the council's own proposed rules of procedure that they could discuss. And also on June 21st, during one of the council's regular sessions, you took public comment on the rules of procedure, and there was council discussion on those rules of procedure and subsequent work that went into one of the versions. So we have what we've provided to the council in tonight's packet are basically 3 versions. We were going to try to provide strike-throughs, but there have been so many changes that it became confusing to staff. It obviously became confusing even during council discussion, because even when we came up with the 3rd version, there was repetition of some of the sections. There was some errors that council member Brooke, for instance, found. So what we did, we took, for one of the versions in your packet, you have our existing council rules of procedure as the baseline. You have a version that was, I would characterize that, where Councilmember Collins did a lot of work that council all provided input, where that was the version where best practices were incorporated from other communities into our rules of procedure, and where you went through section by section. Then there's the final version, where that version was actually updated to reflect some of Councilmember Brooks' comments and changes, as well as the redundancy that was eliminated, as well as some of the public comments and other items that were brought forward. The other thing that I want to remind council, that these are your rules of procedure. This is how you operate. And don't be afraid tonight to adopt something, because you don't have to live with it forever. In other words, it might be, I would love to see unanimous on each section, that each of you agree with each section. But if there's one section that you don't come to a unanimous, but the majority of you are in favor of it, recognize that any of those sections can be modified at any time. In fact, I would encourage the council at no later than a year from now to at least revisit it, and just if there were areas that you felt needed to be modified because they just weren't working the way you envisioned, you make those modifications. Or again, you could do that at any time. They're your rules of procedure. The other thing that I would say, and then I'll conclude my remarks, is that council rules of procedure not only kind of give you the guidelines in how you operate, they also, if they're written with clarity, they provide confusion to the public who watches the council when they operate. And of course, part of that involves public comment and other things that the public participates in local government. So good council rules procedure that are fairly clear actually, again, reduce confusion with the public on those issues, whether they agree or disagree with the way you operate. they shouldn't be confused. So again, I'll leave that as the opening remarks, and you can have your discussion.
Okay, I saw Brad's hand go first, and then it was me. Let me just, if everybody will get a turn here, so we'll need to speak. So we'll start with Brad. Just let me make a note that I'd like us to kind of establish a starting block here, and said this has been an evolution. So state, I think, what you need to, I'd like to hear, if you refer, which version you're going to be referring to. I see this as an evolutionary process. I'd like us to kind of maybe focus on version 3, as it's theoretically was where we evolved to. So Brad first.
Well, I don't want to start with version 3, but I want to agree that version 2 and version 3 are better than version 1. And so whichever version we pick, I think is going to be where it's a dynamic document. If we pick 2, and a lot of suggestions that have been made by Sissy, I believe, could be incorporated at a later date if we can discuss and agree on. If we pick version 3, the same thing is true. So what I'd like to do is, instead of trying to wordsmith this for the 88th time, is simply do a polling of the council as to support version 2 or 3, and then move on and have a discussion after the fact about other changes that we could all agree on. Because I think there's a way for us to agree on most of these things. But I think if we don't adopt 2 or 3, we're gonna just be mired here where we have been for too long. And frankly, I don't wanna wordsmith it at this point. I wanna vote for version 2 or 3, and I'll defer to Sissy, but I want to support version 2 at this point.
Okay, Lee.
I start off with thanking staff. This is quite a process to go through. I'm curious to know if staff or if any council members has ran this by the American Civil Liberties Union. We do deal with the public. We did learn this after the fact with this panhandling ordinance that was thrown around, that the ACLU was very concerned about that. And of course, we know what happens usually when the ACLU becomes involved. Generally, someone gets taken to court. It will result in attorney fees being levied. And I would just ask everybody to slow down on this out of fear of litigation. We can't afford litigation. And having said that, what I'd really like to get into is our ethics code. That is costing us money. And I was under the impression that we would have a dollar amount tonight to put on what that ethics code costs us.
I appreciate your concern. That is not what this matter is clearly stipulated as a matter regarding those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I would ask that we slow this down. Right now, we've lived with our last council rules of procedure that's dated from 2015, hasn't gone to court. And I just ask everybody to slow this down. My fear is giving additional power to the chair that runs these meetings. There's also sign ban language that I'd like to get into that really has never been addressed. So we need to actually slow down and stay with number 1 and just let this ride for a minute.
I prefer version number 3, but there are some paragraphs in there. First one is on I-82. It says says, individuals who reside within the city will be called to speak first with preference given to city residents. It does not say businesses. It does not, in my opinion, include those who may live on Caroline or any other medical facility. If it wants to be included to be city residents and businesses, that's fine with me. But on our public sign-in sheet, it says, are you a city of Fort Angeles resident or business owner? On I-82, it just says city residents. I realize from the address, it's very difficult to tell who's at times where. And my other one is on I-72 and continues on to I-73. Paragraph number 5, down at the bottom, it says, subject to council's right to overrule such decision. I feel that that also should be placed at the end of the next paragraph, which talks about, if such conduct continues and prevents the council from accomplishing its business in a reasonable, efficient manner, the presiding officer may call recess, may request the removal of such persons from the council chambers, may remove all persons from the council chambers, may move the meeting to a different location, may adjourn the meeting, or may take such other appropriate action as permitted by law, subject to the council's right to overrule such decision. I-72, and it continues on to I-73, the first full paragraph in I-73.
And again, go back right here, it's suggesting a different place for this paragraph.
No, I'm an additional place for that paragraph.
In addition to this, there be some,
He wants some redundancy.
and whatever that be,
In that first full paragraph of page I-73. Where it talks that the presiding officer may call recess, removal,
okay, so we'll add that to that then.
yes, because paragraph 5, in my opinion, is not redundancy. It speaks nothing of what will happen if it continues.
Maybe I can, this is not a comment to not include that, but this is just kind of a overall arching comment. At any time, the council does have rules of procedure, and that governs how you operate. At any time, the council can, by a majority of the council, can change something for that meeting, can overrule a decision. So just so you understand, the council always has that right, even if it's not specifically stated in the rules of procedure. The council as a body has the ability to modify, even for a particular meeting, particular situation, those items. So that's just an overarching statement, but it can be added also to the.
Thank you. I'm just speaking, from the short time I've been here of what I've seen in the past. And
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
are you through now?
yes,
Okay. I was hoping that we could hear from Sissy and have her support version 3, as I suggested when I was supporting version 2. What I'm concerned about is that if we all do our list of wordsmithing items, my list is pretty darn long, and I don't want to do that. I would rather take up those, and I'm not opposed to what Mike would say, or anyone else for that matter. I just don't want to get into everybody's wordsmithing because I think it will take us too long. And so I request that we could hear from Sissy about version 3. She did the work on it, and I appreciate it.
I would agree to it. whether it's next 5 minutes, whatever, ask everybody to comment, but I'm just going by the show of hands at first, so, Sissy, I think we're right here.
All right, thank you. I appreciated, the version 2 that we got, because it put in some interesting new ideas in different cities. The problem with the version 2 that we got is that we were working this in bits and pieces, so we had, different sections that we looked at, and there was a lot of redundancy, and then there was a lot of things that were just a little bit out of order. Like the quorum, I know doesn't show up until we actually get to the meeting section, so it's like, when is it appropriate, when it's not? So, I would say 95% of version 2 is in version 3. It's just cleaned up. It's cleaned up to the point where it flows and it makes sense, and that's what we want. And it's also at some of the points that people had talked about. So, that's the biggest difference between version 2 and version 3. Version 2 still has the individual cities' statements, and because it has the individual city statements, it's still a little bit out of order, and things get kind of placed in there. And like I said, they're really good ideas. All I did was I took some of those and I moved them somewhere else and merged them and modified them. So, to me, version 3 is a little bit smoother, it reads better, it keeps most of version 2 in place. And I do appreciate the additions that were added to that. I think those are 2 good statements to modify. So I am content to vouch for it. Version 3.
That'd be very good. That'd be very good.
Well, I do agree with Councilmember Collins. I think they're both better than the first, and I just, right now I'm looking at version 3, but also in version 2 and 3, I would like to add when we're under, like, for instance, version 3, page I-81 at the top, is talking about council members shall not delay or interrupt proceedings of the council, nor interrupt or disparage any council member while speaking. I would like to add, nor use profanity.
You're in the first paragraph?
Yes.
The first one.
Or yes,
You're
I just, but on page I-81 at the top, I would just like to add, not use profanity.
Will we have a list of profane words?
No.
So that'll be decided by the mayor? As chair? Or us as a council, or individually will decide?
I just want to add 3 words, no use profanity, period, as my contribution. Thank you.
Again, any comments before I kind of get some, I want to keep winnowing this down to a consensus.
Sure. So a couple general thoughts over the years, whether it be working with rules and procedures of service clubs, one is in Rotary or homeowners associations and things of that nature. It seems like every organization has their own rules and procedures, and typically found that simplicity is the easiest for everybody involved. Our version 1 had roughly 9 pages, version 2 has 21 pages, and version 3 has just slightly over 16 pages. So, is it time for a change out of version 1? Yeah, I think we probably have evolved to the point where we need to make some clarifications, because life gets a little more complicated all the time. Will we ever get to the point of being able to make rules and procedures that cover every single issue? That doesn't make sense, because if it's not covered by rules and procedures, it defaults to Robert's Rules of Order. So, I don't think we have to write another volume. So, the simplicity, I like a lot of the stuff in version 3. I appreciate you kind of tweaking and condensing it a little bit. And I personally would favor version 3. And over the next 6 to 12 months, I'm sure we'll be making some notes and seeing some things that would continue to need to be tweaked, and I'd be always open for continued review and adjustment.
Aaron, a little asterisk here. City manager McCain has noted, and I think we must keep this in mind. This is a working document. This is intended to be a framework, kind of the floor, if you will, that we have something pretty, whether it's 21 pages, 12 pages, 16 pages, whatever that is. At least we have something to refer to. I think we have moved on from version 1. But this is something we have the opportunity, right, to change as it may become necessary. I don't want anybody to think even whatever we may do, we have a motion tonight that we are closing or slamming the door on further rewrites or we should be getting smarter as we move forward. So, but I want to get back to the question that Lee raised. I think it's Bill, you have reviewed this as well. Is that right? As our attorney, you've reviewed these 3 different versions. Hold it over in your mind. Lee raised the question of the ACLU or other entities that might weigh in on this thing. Do you have any? Are you permitted, or do you have any thoughts or comments here?
Yes, I have reviewed the 3 versions, and I think version 3 in particular is probably better from the sense that it eliminates some redundancy and it eliminates some questions that could be raised by having 2 or 3 provisions all relating to the same thing. So in that sense, it's much cleaner, much better. And I have looked at it from a legal point of view too. Many of the provisions, and particularly the provisions relating to the public comment at meetings, things like that, are actually taken directly from cases, from appellate cases in the federal courts and in state courts around the country, that have looked at what rules do apply when the public is speaking at council meetings. And so I'm reasonably comfortable that those reflect the state of the current law on that.
Mr. Collins.
Well, I don't want to end up voting against version 2 or 3. I want to vote for version 2 or 3. And so that's why I moved that we have a polling of the council saying whether they support version 1, 2, or 3. And if there's majority for one of those versions, then we accept that as our adopted rules of procedure. So that's my motion.
Okay, so I vote for number 3.
Okay, you second.
Really?
So I'll second your thing to pull everybody so that people else can sense.
I think this helps us get to some consensus.
Right, so my polling is for version 3.
Mr. Reed.
Version 3.
Deputy Mayor Kidd.
I like them both.
2 or 3.
3.
Well, I didn't mean that you had to say 3.
And I did take it that way. I just like them both, and it's hard to choose.
Mr. Gates.
I would go for version 3 at this point.
Mr. Whitten.
I support version 1 as it currently stands. We don't know the repercussions yet of this.
Okay, Mr. Collins.
In support of the council, I'll vote for version 3.
And I will as well. So we have a consensus in that regard. So I think that helps this discussion get to moving this discussion along. The staff has, in our submitted to us, your recommendations, we have a discussion, which we are in course of doing. Is there a further consensus? However, having said that, I think we have, and I'm not saying we're shutting down the discussion, but we can, as a council, to move a motion forward on this matter and move on to another agenda. I don't want to close discussion. I want to have us have that we have an opportunity tonight, if you so choose, to move this matter forward. Recognize we have some options, but
Mr. Mayor,
what would you like to do?
point of order, I think we voted for version 3, and I think we've adopted it. I think
In fact, you saw this.
that's what I thought the intention of the motion was.
Mayor and council, the way and Councilmember Collins, the way that we, I think Bill and I understood it, is that you were looking for a consensus to move forward into a vote, I think. At least that's the interpretation that we took. So it's just more or less, it sounds like a formality at this point, but it would be much cleaner if there was a motion made based on the consensus and you voted on that.
Well, I'm just trying to, kind of bring
Well,
this.
Mr. Mayor, for the purpose of continued discussion, I make the motion that we adopt version 3 of the city council rules and procedures as presented before us.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to move forward as our rules of council rules of procedure, version 3. Further discussion.
Yes, I would like to, make sure that the two amendments that were brought up, by both Ms. Kidd and, Meredith, here,
Sure,
that's
I think it's
fine.
good.
That's all right.
So that, both of those amendments, I guess it's 3 of them.
Could you be very, please be
So,
specific here.
I'll be specific. So the amendment on page I-73, adding the line at the very end of the first paragraph saying, subject to the council's right to overrule such decision. That's one of them. The second one is on page 81, I-81, saying nor use profanity, and then the last one's on I-82, adding to the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph, adding to city residents and businesses.
Very well, business on business.
Just a clarification on that, I believe it should be resident and business owner, somebody that's directly impacted, I believe, by the council's decision. I think that was Mr. Emeritus, Councilmember Emeritus' intent, right?
Resident and business.
Yeah, I think consistent with the sign sheet.
So,
Okay, duly noted. Jennifer, you've got that?
I do, so we're amending the motion to add that?
Yes, I guess that was. Well,
I was in favor of amending my motion to include those 3 items.
And can I do
Second your amendment?
yes.
Where was
I
this?
seconded, so I'm gonna make them modifications.
All right, further discussion, anybody who's not had a chance to, I wanna make sure we have a thorough and. Hearing none, question, of course, the motion is, if you wanna state, Jennifer, do you want this, why don't you,
Would you like me to?
yeah, please.
It was moved by Councilmember Gase and seconded by Councilmember Rook to adopt version 3 of the council rules of procedure, including the amendments on page I-73 to add subject to council right to overrule the decision. Page I-81, we're adding nor use profanity. On page I-82, added to the fourth paragraph during the public comment for city residents and business owners.
Okay, great. Well understood, everybody, the motion has been made in second and as amended. All those in favor of the motion